Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar on coronavirus managing international companies in challenging times. My name is Annie and I am the Business Development Coordinator at Ius Laboris, and I will be facilitating this session for you. Our presenters today are all lawyers from the Ius Laboris firms in Italy, France, Belgium and Germany. Okay, so that's it from me. I will now hand over to our first speaker, Lea Rossi from Italy. Go ahead, Lea. You are welcome to start.
Dr. Toffoletto de Luctamaio, Italian, the firm of Ius Laboris. We will try in this webinar today to give you some support to solve in these challenging and bit surreal times in employment law across some countries in Europe. We will start to give you an overview of the current measures and also looking a bit to the future. Restrictive measures are in force in all the 4 countries we are dealing today. In some different way, what we can say is Italy, was the first country that has been affected by coronavirus, has been progressively locked down since 11 March 2020, and all the measure will last right now until 13 April 2020. The strict lockdown, the really strict lockdown started 25 March 2020, including stopping and suspending non-essential activities. All these measures will be probably extended, even if we do not have any date. Similar situation we have in France, in which the lockdown started in 17 March 2020 and will last until 15 April. Also in that case, we think that no date suggested, but it will probably be extended. Partially different situation we have in Belgium and in Germany. There is a lockdown a little bit light since middle of March 18 and 22nd March 2010, and it will last until 19 April and 20th of April. In both cases, and so in all the countries, this measure will be extended. But we talk about Italy. Current lockdown restrictions are quite wide and are applying in all the Italian territory. There are substantially all prohibited activities. All school, university, museum, gyms are closed. All sporting, cultural, even football, cultural and recreational events are cancelled. Industrial activity, they are not essentially are prohibited, so suspended, as same for retail sectors, bar, restaurant, touristic place, and are closed with some listed exceptions. Travel inside and outside the country is prohibited, and all movement of individuals outside their homes is not allowed, with 3 fundamental exceptions. We're talking about proven travel for work, health reason, and emergency. Of course, meeting and auto group activities are not allowed in any case. There are permitted activities. From a company, from an industrial point of view, we have essential industrial activity. There are listed sectors, food, health activity, transport, telecoms, etc., that are permitted, are identified by a specific code, so it's a strict and a list. And same for essential retail as listed, food shops, delivery, takeaway services, pharmacies, petrol stations, banks, telecommunication are still working. Of course, with all respecting health and safety measures. Individual physical activity is allowed only near home and not in groups. Employers' obligation. Of course, employers' obligation and workforce management have completely been changed in the last months. So we have a lot of health and safety measures to be respected. Very strange for Italy. You are permitted to check your employees' body temperature and to stop them from entering if they have a temperature of more than 37.5 degrees. The premises must be cleaned up and disinfected regularly. You should put in place social distancing obligatory and protective equipment gloves, mask, etc. And that the employer should provide information about procedure, instruction, and contact numbers. And of course, all this activity must be managed also with the unions and with on health supervision. What we suggest in addition to that is, of course, make some training of how to keep social distance and how to wear protective equipment. On 17 March, the government also introduced management of workforce measures, like most important redundancy and dismissals for economic reason ban for 60 days up to 17 May 2020. It introduced a simplified smart working, and it's possible a self-imposed reduction for executive salaries. There are imposed organizational changes like shift working, layout, meeting, travel policy, etc. And also, very important, the employer has the option to impose paid leave or untaken vacation or rest days if needed. In addition to that, we have some government support schemes. We have specific for COVID, so we have emergency COVID wage guarantee funds for industrial sector or for commercial sectors, or are available to all employees either after the 23rd of February 2020. This measure will last for 9 weeks, and you can see on the slide they are given the 80% of non-worked hours, and in the maximum but capped, so in the maximum 900, around 900 and 1,200 gross amount for each employee. There are also provided special leave, extraordinary leave, babysitting voucher, bonus of 100 euros for people still working. All these procedures are very quick in theory, and without strong or long union procedure. I give you now the floor, virtual floor, to Guillaume Bordier from Capstone, France.
Yes, hello, thank you, Léa, and hello everyone. I'm Guillaume Bordier. I'm a partner at Capstone, the French member of Ius Laboris, and I'm happy to share with you in these difficult circumstances the current situation in France. As in many countries, France is currently facing a very difficult situation with more than 10,000 deaths as of yesterday. And unfortunately, the peak of infections has not been reached yet, and the number of patients in intensive care is still very high. So, as Léa said, the lockdown measures started in France on the 17th of March for 2 weeks, but these measures have been extended now until the 15th of April. However, it is already certain that the lockdown will be extended in the next few days for at least 2 weeks. So currently the situation is as follows. So there are also, like in Italy, several prohibited activities. All schools and universities are currently closed until at least the beginning of May. All sporting, cultural, recreational activities are definitely cancelled. And no establishment can receive customers until the 15th of April, also to be extended, including restaurants and shops, and with very limited exceptions, food stores, delivery and takeaway services, pharmacies, petrol stations, and the list is not final. All the individuals must remain at home, with very few exceptions, including travel to workplaces, along with business trips that cannot be postponed. So telework is definitely a rule that must be adopted. And the persons who are required to work in company premises or to travel must hold at the same time a personal certificate indicating the reason for leaving their home, and also an attestation from the employer stating that the employee cannot telework. So it's very essential that all the persons are in the possession of these documents when they want to move outside from their home. There are, of course, permitted activities, which are mainly short-distance travel, up to 1 hour per day, and a maximum distance of 1 kilometer from their home, related to individual physical activities, walking, and also to go to the essential food shops. Companies can continue to work. There is no list of essential activities, so as a rule, the companies can continue to work, but teleworking is the rule. So if teleworking is not possible, hygiene and social distancing measures of minimum 1 meter must be observed in all circumstances. So in practice, employers are currently facing strong labor unions and employee pushback when they try to maintain their activity. Moving on to the employer's obligation and workforce management. French law provides for a general and strict obligation for the employer to ensure the employee's safety at all times in the workplace. Any breach of this obligation may result in criminal proceedings and lawsuits from the employees. So as a result of these general principles, employers must take all appropriate measures to first to assess the risks and also to take all preventive measures to protect the health and safety of all the employees. So the employer has to provide appropriate equipment. It also has to change the way the work is done and organized. And there are also some mandatory measures which apply. All travels that can be deferred are strictly prohibited, and the employer must impose social distancing of minimum 1 meter in the workplace. Also, the employer has to comply with the hygiene rules, such as the regular cleaning, the supply of soap or hydroalcoholic gel, and also has to provide very strict instructions and make sure that the employees comply with these instructions. It is very important during this period to cooperate with the Social and Economic Committee, which is the new name for the Works Council in France, because the health and the Social and Economic Committee is also in charge of health and safety. It's also important to involve, as possible, the occupational doctor. In terms of management, as I said before, telework is definitely the rule, unless it is really impossible, and work must be adapted to comply with the mandatory measures. So this requires, in practice, for many companies to change the work organization and change, in particular, working time organization. One thing which is really important, because a lot of companies are trying to cope with the current lockdown and to find solutions to maintain their activity if they can, or to minimize the consequences of the suspension of their activities. So now it is possible, because the law has been voted recently, it is possible to impose paid vacation, subject to the conclusion of a company collective agreement or a sector-wide collective bargaining agreement, or to impose rest days to the employees to be able to, when the work will be able to start again, so that the employees are available for work and to not take their rest day or paid vacation when the work will restart. A lot of new laws and regulations have been voted to adapt to the current situation, especially concerning the Social and Economic Committees. The rules have been simplified to organize meetings via video conference or conference call, which was not possible before. And in terms of collective dismissals, which is a current concern for many companies, there is no official dismissal ban, but the Ministry of Labor has been very clear that a company which would start collective dismissals in the current situation would face a very high risk that the validity of the process would be at risk. So a lot of companies have decided to postpone their potential collective dismissal projects. Also, many labor law provisions and deadlines have been temporarily adapted. For instance, working time limits have been increased in the companies that are able to continue work. Social elections have been postponed, and other measures have been adapted to face the current situation. Concerning the government support, in France, we already had in place a partial unemployment scheme that companies could use in case of temporary economic difficulties or in case of exceptional circumstances. Of course, the coronavirus is clearly an exceptional circumstances. So the partial unemployment scheme has been adapted quite quickly by the French government to make it easier for the employees to use it and to simplify the process, and also to make it more favorable to the employers. So there are now simplified online procedures. Everything is done online on a dedicated website with an approval from the labor authorities within 2 days instead of 30 days. Instead of paying a fixed amount of 8 euros per hour like in the past, now the employer will be reimbursed of 100% of the remuneration that the employer will maintain. Also, the scheme has been extended to certain categories of employees, such as top executives, sales representatives, and so on. Also, the government has taken some provisions to postpone the payment of social security contribution and income tax for the employers, and the solidarity fund has been made available to small companies and independent workers. And also, the government has passed some new laws to provide for financial support to the employers. In terms of remuneration, when the employer decides to use the partial unemployment scheme, so in case of suspension of the employment contract or reduction of the number of working hours, the employer has to maintain 70% of the gross salary, which corresponds to about 80% or between 80% and 84% of the net salary, which means that the salary decrease for the employees are quite low. The French state will reimburse 70% of the gross salary rate. There is only a cap which applies, which corresponds to 4.5 times the minimum wage, which means that for an employee who is paid up to 6,700 euros per month, the employer will be reimbursed of the total cost. So, and there is also a favorable tax and social security treatment with very low contributions to be paid. Now we can switch to Belgium.
Thank you, Guillaume. I hope everybody hears me well. I'm Inge Verhelst from Kleis and Engels, and I will give you a short overview of the situation in Belgium. We are now in our third week of what we call lockdown-lite, or what our government calls a lockdown-lite, because they refuse to call it a real lockdown. But I have to admit, after 3 weeks, it doesn't really feel very light. As in the other countries, we also have in Belgium a number of prohibited activities. Schools and universities are closed. Restaurants and shops are closed, with the exception of food stores, pharmacies, petrol stations, and news agents. All sporting, cultural, recreational events are being cancelled as well. All other companies can continue working, but must mandatorily, where possible, organize teleworking. And this is what we now see massively happening in Belgium, especially for white-collar workers. They are all working from home. If teleworking is not possible, then the company must respect what we call the social distancing rules, meaning that employees must work with a distance of 1.5 meters in between them. Now, for companies with non-essential activities for whom it's not possible to organize teleworking nor social distancing, they should close down their activities. And this is what we've seen happening for instance, the construction industry. When the lockdown-lite was announced, they all stopped working. We now see recently that they are trying to start their activities again with respecting the social distancing rules. The rules are a bit different for companies with essential activities. They must continue their activities, and they should make a maximum effort to organize telework and social distancing. There is a quite extensive list of essential activities in Belgium, but I think they're quite similar to the other countries. So in essence, it's healthcare, everything that has to do with the food chain, banking industry, and public services. Why do we call it a lockdown light in Belgium? Because outdoor activities are permitted, and I think we have a little bit more liberty there than in France and Italy. We can go running, walking, cycling, and we can do this in with our family, in the family circle, or with your family and or one friend. And this week it has been announced that we can also go skateboarding and roller skating if we would like to. Now, what does all this mean for the work floor? As in the other countries, there are, of course, health and safety measures to be adopted by the employers. And in the first place, it means taking into account the two key principles of teleworking and social distancing. And as we speak, there are inspections of the health and safety inspection going on. They are controlling companies, and they are providing fines to companies who do not adhere to these rules. And there has been a number of companies already closed down because they did not adopt teleworking or social distancing. Now, next to the government rules, there is of course a general principle which also applies in Belgium, principle of duty of care, meaning that the employer has to take all necessary preventive measures to secure employees' health and safety, and they should do so in consultation with the company doctor and also with the Committee for Prevention and Protection at Work, which is the consultation body when it comes to well-being at work. And this will mainly result in the basic rules that we all know. Most companies will adopt social distancing rules, keep the workplace clean, and provide sufficient soap, hand gels, and instructions for washing hands. There's a ban in Belgium as well on non-essential travel. Now, when it comes to medical testing, this is difficult in Belgium. Other than in Italy, it will be very debatable for an employer to measure employees' temperature or to adopt any other medical tests. And this has to do with issues, on the one hand, under Belgian employment law, but on the other hand, also under privacy and data protection laws. On the workforce, as already mentioned, we see white collars mainly teleworking, blue collars have to adopt the social distancing principles. But of course, there's, as in the other countries, there are many companies with closed or reduced activities, and those companies can apply for temporary unemployment for force majeure. Now, this is an existing regime of temporary unemployment, which is normally rarely used. And has now been not only extended but also simplified. And we have today more than 1 million Belgian employees in the scheme of temporary unemployment, which is really something we've never seen before. Other than in other countries, there is no dismissal ban in Belgium. So we see that companies are already now, after 3 weeks of lockdown, considering dismissals. Also, other than, for instance, in Italy, there is no possibility in Belgium to impose upon employees to take holidays. On the other hand, it's not possible either for employees to unilaterally revoke planned holidays. What type of support scheme do we have? I already mentioned that Belgian companies are using the temporary unemployment for force majeure scheme to a very large extent. It's a very simple procedure. There is no prior procedure that has to take place, so they can just simply have to declare days of unemployment through an online scheme. So it's really very simple to use. It's a scheme that can be used for full unemployment, but you can also use partial unemployment, where employees will shift days of work with days of unemployment. The only limit is that you have to work with full days. During the temporary unemployment scheme, the employee will receive 70% of a capped salary, which has been increased with an extra allowance of 5.63 euros per day in temporary unemployment. And this will result for most of the employees in an allowance of about 1,500 euros net. Now we see very much, and certainly the larger companies will very often supplement these temporary unemployment allowances, and they are also encouraged to do so because the supplements to the unemployment allowances will be exempt from Social Security contributions. There's also a support scheme for self-employed freelancers and managers called the Bridging Right. There is a possibility for companies to postpone payments of Social Security and tax. And next to the federal regimes, there's also regional support measures, both for employers and for employees. So this was in a nutshell the situation in Belgium. I would like to give the word to Burkhard for Germany.
Thank you very much, Burkhard Göpfert from Klimt in Germany. And I would like to turn straight into the presentation. On my first slide, you can see the prohibited activities and permitted activities, very similar to what we have heard before. We have a slightly larger distancing rule, and I think the most important point on this slide is certainly the last one, that it varies slightly from state to state. In Germany, we have a much tighter control within the southern part of Germany, Bavaria in particular, since we are regarded as one of the hotspots within Germany, and in North Rhine-Westphalia, and a slightly more relaxed control on the other parts of Germany. And I've had a client yesterday who was even able to travel back and forth to Prague in Czech Republic, so some of the borders are still open, and for business reasons with the necessary documentation, which is basically a letter, an invitation letter stating the necessity to travel. This client could even visit the premises in another country, but that's mainly an exception. We are currently completely locking down airports and imposing restrictions for people who arrive in the country that will be issued by the government later today, most likely, so that also the air travel is further restricted in Germany. Moving on to the workplace, I think it is important to see that most of the measures that we want to impose need Works Council approval in those companies that have Works Councils. As in all the other jurisdictions, everybody who has a chance to go teleworking will need to go teleworking, otherwise observing the social distancing. We do not have a dismissal ban in Germany, very similar to the other jurisdictions. However, and that's a point that I need to make here, is that under our regime for short-term work, which I will be addressing in a minute, there is very often an agreement between unions or Works Council and the employers that during the time where you receive the government funding for short-term work, dismissals shall be excluded. And companies need to be super cautious in agreeing to this, in particular if they agree to a long-term regime of short-term work, that they can at any time go back from short-term work back into a situation where they can issue notices for termination, since we do not yet know how this is moving forward. There were a few questions raised by the audience, like, for example, what do we need to provide in the home offices? Quite frankly, in the first period that will be now slow in Germany, finishing most likely by the end of next week, we did not look so deeply into the equipment part and the compensation part of people going on home office, but we expect that if these measures are being extended, or if companies extend the measures of keeping people at home, that there will be questions of, is this a proper workplace? Does it comply with the rules and regulations? Are the working times properly recorded? And how is overtime being dealt with are questions that are now popping up. I think it's also important to mention that the discussion about the vacation is coming up in Germany, because we do not want to have all the vacation being automatically moved into the second part of this year, when we expect the economy heating up again, at least here in Germany. And that's why, there is a huge discussion about whether we should be imposing vacations, but this will only be possible with the consent of a works council. Otherwise, it is not valid to impose vacation. But I must say that a lot of my clients already impose vacations, whether or not this is valid, and just because they see the need to take vacation now rather than in the second part of next year. Turning to the next page, support schemes. First and foremost, we have the short-term work scheme, which you can see on the right-hand side is being explained, is 60, and if you have children, 67% of your past salary will be reimbursed to you by the government for a period of up to 12 months. Most companies have introduced similar schemes. In the meantime, we have about 4 million people in Germany now under short-term. Lufthansa, for example, has 80,000 employees on short-term. Fraport, which is the company running the airport in Frankfurt today, reported about 18,000 people in short-term. So you see, this is the standard tool in Germany to address the situation. And for smaller companies, there is additional money provided by the local and by the state governments. In addition, we have a federal funding of about 600 billion euros available for the federal government to buy out banks in particular, or insurance companies if they would turn into trouble. But currently our view is that most likely a lot of the restrictions may be lifted by the end of next week or 1 or 2 weeks later, and we will slowly go down into a rather relaxed way of looking at these measures. And it is, of course, the hope of the federal government that they will not have to bail out any of the larger companies. That currently they are really focusing on the small business, as you can see from this slide, rather than on the large companies. The large companies are being helped with this quite extensive short-term work program.
Okay, and what are now we want to talk about what of the future? Well, we called in Italy phase 2 or post-emergency plan, and we will try to introduce you about what we are discussing, what we are talking about in our countries. And I think that some question coming from the audience can be. We will talk a little bit also about that. Starting from Italy, of course. The first things are financial measures, financial support for specific sector in particular. We talk about tourism, culture, construction, etc. Because of course this are more affected and will be more affecting in next months. And also we are a lot of discussion about government financial support for all the companies, from the very big ones to the very small shop in the corner. In that area, a big discussion also about the what we called universal temporary salary for everybody, in order to grant people that are not clearly covered by the scheme provided from the government. We're talking about freelance people or very small entrepreneur, etc. This is also to reducing the impact of future layoffs. They are, of course, foreseen in the next 6 to 10 months. Okay, other big discussion is about data protection and privacy for health and safety data managed by the employer. As in other countries, and Inga and Guillaume also were talking about, of course, a lot of health and safety data will be collected or have been collected by also by the employers. So now we are dealing with how to do with this data and how we can manage temperature, collecting temperature. That's answering to a question. It's not mandatory to measure temperature, but is a possibility for the employer. But the employer can impose to the temperature measure to enter in the workplace. That is quite strange and very uncommon for Italy because, of course, we have a data protection and labor law rules very strict on it. But we are just a big discussion about that. Also because we are talking about blood testing for identifying people that can go back to work as soon as possible. So how to manage this blood testing, if the data or not will be transferred to the employer, how the employer can choose people that can go back to work quite easily. Then also discussion that and link with the employer, they are about health and safety data tracked by apps and the effect on this on the workplace. So, for instance, if the employer has got employees who have been tracked to be in contact with the people that are positive to the coronavirus, how he can manage this information, how he can receive this information, and he can implement, for instance, suspension from work. Big issue are connecting to reorganization of the workplace because the idea is that we will not back to work as we did before for a while. So the layout, change of layout, shift structure of the office to minimize contact and maintain social distance. Of course, in that part, and I am answering also a question coming from the audience, there a big issue will be with remote working. So there's no obligation right now to pay for desk, offices, line devices. But of course, it can be a future issue because when the smart working or remote from home will be more structured and organized. And what we suggest normally to clients is also to keep a little bit of control about devices and line in order to keep control on data protection of companies' data. And finally, I think one of the most interesting issue that we are talking about is what we call welfare measure for future employees. The welfare is what we call all the services that the employer can provide, and they have a tax exemption or they are less costly for the employer, and that are already in force. That it will change in the future because we can imagine that there will be more interested, employees will be more interested in insurance, in checkup, helping for homeschooling and babysitting, because of course there will be a great issue if as apparently will happen, school will not reopen this year. So there are a lot of discussion, also a lot of discussion about that in order to find a way to give employees not cash but services already paid and maybe more fiscal efficient from the employer. And I think something similar in all other countries. Let's start with Guillaume Baudet for France about what is the future in France.
Yeah, thank you, Lea. So as we are in the middle of the crisis, many employers are now the current concerns are now two main concerns. The first one is to ensure that they will be able to benefit from the partial unemployment scheme and be reimbursed by the French state of the amount that they will maintain to the employees, so the 70% of the remuneration that they will maintain. So many companies are still preparing the documents to be filed on the dedicated website. The second concern for companies today is to try to maintain, for those who can maintain their activities, is to have the appropriate measures to maintain part or all of their activities. And this is, in order to do so, they have to adapt health and safety measures. On a national standpoint, the question now is about the wearing of masks outside of the home, which may be imposed in the future or in the very next future. It is still under discussion given the current shortage of equipment, but this may be imposed in the future, and especially in companies which continue to work. We know that work continuation during the lockdown is a sensitive issue for many labor unions and for many workers who try to use their right of withdrawal because they consider that the health and safety measures are not ensured by the employer. So there are many discussions about the practical conditions, the equipment that the employer must provide, the work organization, and that's really a concern currently. About the end of lockdown strategy, it is still under construction, and we know that the lockdown will probably be extended. The National Scientific Committee has recommended this morning to extend the lockdown for several weeks, so not only 2 or 3 weeks, but several weeks. So we can expect that the lockdown will be for a quite significant a number of days from now. The date and the features remain uncertain. There are discussions, there are many scenarios under consideration, a gradual reopening by region, depending on if the virus has been spread in the region, depending also on the age or the medical background of the population. So it is still unclear, and I think that we will not have a clear view before the next few weeks. From a company standpoint and a government standpoint, there is a very prudent approach to digital tracking, a lot of debate about data protection issues, but the government has very recently evolved in this position because this morning the Minister of Health has announced that the government is working on an app which may be used in order to for the population to have a clear or this app to be used to protect them. For the future, unfortunately, we can expect a wave of insolvencies and restructuring in the future. As I said, even if there is no strict ban for the moment, all the companies have decided to postpone any initiative in this field. But we can expect that as soon as the lockdown will end, a lot of companies will reconsider their plans for the future. Of course, many companies at the moment, more than 500,000 companies have applied for the partial unemployment scheme. So about 6 million of employees are currently benefiting from the partial unemployment scheme. The cost is very high for the government, about 20 billion euros. But still, there might be a need for many companies to take some additional measures to reduce the workforce in the future. We can move to Belgium.
Yes, for Belgium, although it's expected, although we are still on the peak of the epidemics, and although we also expect that we will probably be a few more weeks in the lockdown situation. For the moment, everybody in Belgium is talking about what we call the exit strategy. So how do we get out of this lockdown situation? There's a public task force that was created with 3 main tasks. First of all, they have to increase test capacity. There has been some critics that there hasn't been enough tests carried out in Belgium. So they want to come to 10,000 tests a day. They are also analyzing telecoms data to see how the virus has been spread and where, and to enable to come to targeted measures. And thirdly, as in other countries, it's considered that testing of persons and of employees will be a crucial element in this exit strategy. And so this task force is also analyzing what medical tests can be used. One test that's often named is COVID Alert, which is an app which would not work with location data, because these are of course personal data, and then you have the data protection issues again, but this would work with Bluetooth and would keep track of your contacts, and so they are presenting that they work based on anonymous data. What's also discussed is blood tests or immunity tests to measure whether someone would be fit to work. But for these blood tests, I think there are more constraints from an employment law and data protection law perspective. Otherwise, the government is still considering introducing more flexibility. They have not done so up till now, and this would be very much, this would be a good thing for Belgium because we have very strict working hour regulation. But up till now we haven't seen anything yet. There's also discussions going on a bonus scheme to motivate the working population. As I mentioned before, a lot of companies are almost paying the same salary to the unemployed than to the working population. So now we get the other, we get of course the working population who are complaining and asking for extra bonuses. As for teleworking, there was a question whether there is there's an obligation to provide equipment and to pay cost compensation, and actually the response is the same as for the other countries. For the time being, there is no clear obligation to do so, and I think most of the companies are not paying for the moment, but of course this could also change when the lockdown situation would last longer. We have also social elections still coming up. They were meant to take place during the month of May, but they are postponed until the end of 2020. So we have trade unions still in campaign mode and who are getting a bit frustrated with this situation, understandingly also, but sometimes it's not very helpful when you want to negotiate. And then lastly and sadly, we do expect a very big wave of restructurings and dismissals in Belgium, and we already noticed that they are being prepared for the moment. So up to Germany.
Thank you very much. Yeah, maybe quick on two questions. The short-term work can be introduced either by consent of the employee, but if you have a works council, you will need a works council consent, an agreement made with the works council. That was one of the questions. And we also would recommend to file for the short-term work, even though that you want to use it flexibly and maybe only use it for part of the workforce. You can at any time, unless you agree otherwise with your works council, you can at any time go out of the short-term work and then go into the redundancies. So the redundancies will then stop your ability to claim short-term work benefits, but you can at any time go from one scheme, basically from the scheme back into the notice scenario if needed. On the timing in Germany, we expect measures to be lifted or changed by the end of next week. The German car manufacturers have already announced to their suppliers that they expect having their car manufacturing plants back on track as of the 1st or 2nd of May. This is the current timing. We do see a need to provide companies with masks because there's a big discussion now about the necessity to wear masks in the companies if we restart. The governments are heavily buying on masks to provide companies with masks, but I think a recommendation would be to start looking out for masks that you can provide to your employees, although we see a lot of employees already being able to provide themselves with masks here in Germany. Temp checks and other checks, in particular at gates and for employees when they enter the premises, will require a works council approval, and they will also require the consent of an employee. That cannot be done under current law against the willing of the employee. But in these circumstances, people will allow the testing, but you will need a works council approval. What is quite interesting now is that yesterday the German government started to launch an application on iPhones that will be linked to trackers, on fitness trackers, for voluntary increase of data provided to our health system on the moving of people, but also on the general health of people. This has been picked up by an awful lot of people, and I think one of the prerequisites to go back on the normal track in Germany will be to increase the amount of data available to the government over the next 1 or 2 weeks, which will then be the basis for further decision-taking by the government We do also expect insolvencies and restructurings, although German government has restricted the insolvency filing system for the period of the remainder of this year. We see preparations for voluntary filings. We see filings under our umbrella protection scheme of the insolvency law already. One of the big retailers has already filed in Germany. So that will increase, but generally the outlook for Germany is that we may be slowly going back on track by latest mid-May with the major part of our industry. Probably not leisure, probably not sports events and these kind of things, but for the majority of employees, they will be back in their premises to work, most likely latest by mid-May. Thank you very much.
Excellent. We have now reached the end of today's session. As previously mentioned, if you have any queries for the presenters, you can contact them directly by email. If your query is related to a different jurisdiction, you can contact me at annie.laakso@iuslaboris.com or go to the people pages of our website to find the right contact. For some insightful information, and further updates on the coronavirus, I recommend you visit the Ius Laboris Corona page, which is regularly being updated as the situation evolves. From there, you can also upload our coronavirus guide for international employers with information from 57 countries. Don't forget that you can also find all this information in the attachment tab below. Finally, I would like to thank everyone for attending today, and thanks also to our presenters for their insights.